all for joining us on this call today to talk about an issue that I've been working on now for quite a while, which is stopping child hunger. I'm very glad today to be joined by Representative Levin and Representative Hayes, who are leading the fight in the House on this, as well as Lewis from FRAC and Christina from Northwest Harvest, who's working to end childhood hunger in my home state of Washington. You know, I first introduced a version of this bill back in 2014 with the goal of ensuring that kids who rely on meals from their schools don't go hungry in the summer months. And in the years since then, especially this past year, we have all seen how important it is for kids to have consistent access to the meals that our schools provide, even when those kids are not physically going to school. During this pandemic, millions of kids who rely on free or reduced price school meals have been left wondering where to find their next meal with our school buildings closed. And millions of parents have found themselves out of work, and food pantries, as we know, have been overwhelmed. So this has made an already tough situation even worse. Before the pandemic, 1 in 6 Washington state kids lived in a household that struggled to put food on the table. During the pandemic, up to 1 in 3 people in Washington state have been food insecure. So now, following the experience of so many families during the pandemic, we are introducing the Stop Child Hunger Act here today because we have a chance to do exactly what the bill title says: stop child hunger. Because even as school districts and outside organizations have done their best to distribute meals from in-person sites during this pandemic and when school is out of session, we know that no matter how effective the outreach, there will be families who just can't get there or don't even hear about it. So we know the problem and we know the solution. We just need to get this done. And I am more optimistic than ever since President Biden is already essentially implementing the provisions of the bill this summer by expanding pandemic EBT throughout the summer, which will feed more than 30 million children from families with low incomes, thanks to funding from the American Rescue Plan. What our bill will do is take what President Biden is doing this summer and do it every summer and every winter break and every time kids are not physically in schools to get meals. Hunger does not take time off when school buildings are physically closed, so we can't either. We know how to end it. We've shown we can do it. And now all that's left is to get this legislation to President Biden's desk. So I'll do that with some great friends from the House. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Levin.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. And I really especially want to thank Senator Murray for your many years of leadership on this issue, as well as my friend Congresswoman Hayes for her partnership on this bill. You know, it was almost exactly a year ago that I attended a Memorial Day event in our district, and it was set up to distribute food to veterans and to military families in need. There were many children in attendance, and I saw the long line of cars filled with families waiting for their turn to receive some food, and it was heartbreaking. We didn't know then how long this pandemic would last, but we knew that the food insecurity crisis in this country was real and that it demanded significant action. And today I'm glad to say that we are one step closer to making sure those families that I met and millions of others across the country have the food they need to feed their kids when they're not at school. It's simply unconscionable that any child in the United States of America should be allowed to go hungry because their family doesn't have the support that they need. We've got to do better for our children, and we can with the Stop Child Hunger Act. As you've heard, the bill is fairly simple. We're building off of the current pandemic EBT and summer EBT programs to establish a permanent nutrition program for children from low-income families when they're out of school. That means kids will have the nutrition they need to grow and thrive year-round during summer and winter breaks and any other time they're not physically at school buildings. If the need for this bill isn't evident enough, we're hearing from our local food banks that they desperately need more help fulfilling the demand that they're facing. As the head of the San Diego Hunger Coalition said in endorsing this bill, and I quote, "Without such initiatives, hunger relief organizations cannot fulfill the needs of the communities they serve." As we head into the summer months, we know organizations like the San Diego Hunger Coalition and Feeding San Diego are struggling to keep up with this crisis. More than 44,000 children in California's 49th district, in my district, would stand to benefit from this program to help their families put food on the table when they're not in school. We must pass the Stop Child Hunger Act as soon as possible. And I was so glad to see that after significant advocacy, President Biden announced that his American Families Plan will make similar investments in expanding school nutrition programs. One of my top priorities as we advance the American Families Plan will be making sure that this legislation is included so that every child in our country has the food that they need. I'm hopeful that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle can support this simple, common sense legislation. There should be nothing controversial whatsoever about making sure our children are fed. With that, I'll turn it over to my friend, Congresswoman Hayes, and I'm happy to help answer any questions at the end. Thank you again.
Thank you, Representative Levin, and to Senator Murray. Thank you so much for your tireless work in this area and for joining us to introduce this tremendously important piece of legislation. The past 15 months have painted an excruciatingly clear picture of what child hunger looks like. I think we always knew it, but we have seen it amplified and elevated into all of our consciousness over the last year. 1 in 5 children live in homes that are food insecure. And we've really seen the impact of neglecting that problem over the last year. When this pandemic first hit and we were having conversations about the health consequences of a global pandemic and the need to close schools, on my Committee of Education and Labor, one of the #1 concerns was, well, then how will these children eat? The fact that we recognize that children receive 2/3 of their meals from school, and even during a global pandemic, we did not have an alternate plan for how these children would be fed, just really amplifies the need for this piece of legislation. Before coming to Congress, I was a classroom teacher for almost 15 years, and I can tell you unequivocally that hungry children do not learn. There were so many times when I came into the classroom on a Monday morning and a student had their head on the desk because they were so tired and hungry because they hadn't had a meal since Friday. In my district, we have a program called the Backpack Program, where many of our children can show up and get sandwiches to take home that are prepared by volunteers and community sponsors. This is a problem that for so many of our children, there is a fear that if they are not in school, they will not eat. I also worked for many years as a teacher in our summer and after school programs. And we would have in our district, which was a Title I school district, lines around the corner from families and children who had no other place to get a healthy breakfast and a solid lunch. This program is important. We need it. Our children need it. It is reprehensible at this time that we are still not addressing these issues. Hunger is not inevitable. It is a policy choice. Today, I hosted a hearing, my first hearing as the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Nutrition Oversight and Departmental Operations. And we heard from parents about the crises and the stress and the struggle over the last year as their hours were cut, their kids were not in school, and they could not afford to feed them. This is something that we have to address. So the timing could not be more critical. And the fact that the president has already expressed concern and just an effort to help to address these issues really makes this piece of legislation that much more relevant and that much more timely. We've worked on this, but we have to continue that work. Without summer EBT, there's no way to reach all of those other children who have no other nexus, who have no other support systems, who, if they are not in school, they are not having a healthy meal. The Stop Child Hunger Act will expand summer EBT programs, which has proven incredibly effective at reaching the children who are falling through the cracks in every state. Every person that we've talked to have talked about how these programs, the 15% plus up, the emergency assistance that we were able to provide through the American Rescue Plan, how it has helped to support these families. We must continue these programs, not just this year, but as long as our children need them. So I am so happy to be joined by my colleagues and attempting to stop childhood hunger so that our children can focus on just being children. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Louis Gardia, the president of Food Research and Action Center.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And thank you, Senator Murray, Congressman Levin, and Congressman Hayes for including the Food Research and Action Center in today's event, and for your leadership in doing what's needed to close the hunger gap for children across the country. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of FRAC to support the Stop Child Hunger Act of 2021. The Act builds upon the success of summer and pandemic EBT programs in reducing childhood hunger and supporting good nutrition. As we all know, far too many children experience greater food insecurity when schools close and children lose access to school meals. The ability to replace those resources with an EBT card when they don't have access makes all the difference to families. And this is the perfect complement to the summer nutrition programs that provide meals in conjunction with educational and enrichment programs. However, these had a limited reach, and we know they served 1 in 7 children prior to the pandemic. The Stop Child Hunger Act provides an exciting opportunity to truly move the needle on childhood hunger. During the summer, it'll move it when we have school breaks and during unanticipated closures like we saw in the pandemic. And there's evidence to back up this enthusiasm. In 2016, an evaluation of summer EBT demonstration projects showed that providing benefits to families during the summer months reduced top-line food insecurity by 1/5, and the most severe type of food insecurity by 1/3. The evaluation also showed that summer EBT led to an improvement in children's nutritional intake, and it had high rates of participation. Childhood hunger during the summer months is not a partisan issue, as we've heard. Expanding summer EBT nationwide will ensure that children and their families have the critical resources they need to support a healthy diet at home when they lose access to school meals and they can't get to the summer meal sites. It'll also allow states to maintain and build upon the success of the pandemic EBT program, a program that has been critical during the pandemic, as we've heard earlier. FRAC and our partners have been working with leaders like Senator Murray, Representative Hayes, and Levin for years to build a broad base of support for summer EBT. We believe that there has never been a more opportune time than to now to fully leverage the lessons we've learned over the last year and during the pandemic. And that includes making a permanent EBT program so that every child in every state returns to school at the end of the summer, well-nourished and ready to learn. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'll now pass it over to Christina Wong.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be with you today, FRAC, one of our tremendous national partner, and Senator Murray, Representative Levin, and Representative Hayes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. My name is Christina Wong, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for Northwest Harvest. We are Washington's statewide food bank that is working for a more equitable and just food system. More than 500,000 kids in our state are eligible for free and reduced price meals. When schools are closed, whether it's because of the COVID-19 pandemic or during regularly occurring breaks in summertime, these kids too often go hungry. These are the kids who would directly benefit from a year-round EBT program to provide grocery assistance during school closures. Based on pre-pandemic data, we know that kids of color, especially Black, Indigenous, and Pacific Islander students, are disproportionately represented in this population. So the Stop Child Hunger Act could also help close the nutritional and opportunity gaps for students at highest risk because of their struggles with hunger. Added grocery assistance during the school closures would also provide real relief from the anxiety parents feel over how they will be able to put food on the table. People like Melissa, a mom I met in Walla Walla, who told me her monthly food costs would go up $300 to $400 during the summer break. That's per month, just to repeat that once again. The only way she was able to get by and keep her family fed was on the hourly wages and tips that she earned from working 60 to 80 hours per week at 2 jobs. Kelly, another woman I spoke with, told me that she made up for not having enough food by skipping meals herself so that her kids and her grandkids could eat first. It's not good, she said. I get sick, have to stay in bed. It's hard to be poor, hard on your mental health and physical life. With grocery money provided on an EBT, families will be able to buy the food that best meets their dietary and culturally responsive food needs. It means they are less likely to have to make the choice between food or paying for other necessities like rent or utility bills. And for kids, it means they'll have more consistent access to the nutrition they need to stay healthy and ready to focus on learning when schools reopen their doors. This pandemic continues to create serious economic hardship for families. About 1 in 10 Washington adults living with kids have reported this month that they don't have enough food to eat. If we don't address child hunger now, it will be another public health crisis, worsening health, education, and economic outcomes for decades to come. So thank you, Senator Murray and Representatives Levin and Hayes, for providing this critical intervention with the Stop Child Hunger Act. We look forward to working with you in getting this to the President's desk.